Okay, so have you ever tried to break a bad habit and it feels like you are fighting with your own brain? Because honestly, who hasn't been there, right? Whether it's, constantly being on our phones and scrolling,
right,
or reaching for that extra cookie when we know we shouldn't, or procrastination,
yeah,
which I am the queen of.
Right.
But what if I told you it's not really about willpower?
Okay.
It's more about kind of understanding how our brains work.
Yeah. It's really fascinating, actually. Our brains are wired for efficiency. And so habits, even the ones that aren't so great for us, those are really just shortcuts that our brain develops over time.
Okay.
And they're kind of like, have you ever walked through a forest and there's those well-worn paths?
Yeah.
Yeah, our brains default to those paths because it takes less effort.
So it's like you grab your phone and you're like, oh, I'm just going to quickly check this one thing.
Yeah.
And then an hour later, you're down the rabbit hole.
Exactly that. And that's what's so interesting about this. So instead of just saying, oh, that's bad, and I need to white knuckle my way through this, the source is suggesting we need to get curious about the need that habit is fulfilling.
So instead of being like, I need to stop scrolling, it's like, okay, but what am I even looking for in this moment?
Yes.
Am I bored?
What is it? Yeah. Is it a break? Is it a distraction? Is it a way to unwind?
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's not about depriving yourself of something.
Right.
It's figuring out what's a healthier way to get that need met.
Exactly. Let's say you're reaching for your phone after a stressful work call. So instead of just saying, oh, I have no willpower, it's like, okay, what need is this meeting right now? Maybe I just need to decompress. Maybe I just need a mental break from work. And so then you can find other healthier ways to do that same thing.
And that really stuck out to me too, because the source was talking about how to break these habits, and they were talking about friction, add friction to your habits, which is so interesting.
Yeah. It's almost like we're trying to outsmart our own brains a little.
We are.
Right.
That's what it feels like, yeah.
But in a way, we kind of are. Because if we can make that bad habit just a little bit harder to access, that forces our brain to kind of pause and say, ooh, is there something else I could be doing? It's like, if you're trying to eat healthy and you put that bag of chips on the top shelf in the back of your pantry, it's still there, but just the extra effort you have to go through to get it might make you reconsider.
Yeah, so it's like if you're constantly picking up your phone, it's like put the phone in the other room.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Or think about those apps that you can get that will limit your access after a certain amount of time.
Oh, interesting.
That's playing on that idea of friction because it makes it less appealing. It's harder to engage in.
Totally.
And so you're rewiring those pathways, right, by making the old route a little rockier.
So it's like we're really influenced by our environment more than we realize.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of scary.
Yes.
But also, I love this idea of celebrating the small wins. Why is that so important when we're trying to build better habits? Why are those little wins so important?
Because our brain loves a reward.
Right.
It all goes back to how our brain's reward system works. And so every time we achieve even a small goal, our brain releases dopamine.
Yes.
Which is that feel-good neurotransmitter.
It's like those little, you get a little hit of dopamine. It's like a little high five to yourself.
Exactly. Woo, good job.
And here's the cool part, is that our brains don't necessarily differentiate between small wins and big wins.
Oh, wow.
So each time that you choose that healthier option, no matter how small, it's reinforcing that behavior. And it's making you that much more likely to do it again in the future.
So even if you're, you decided to not eat that, sugary snack in the afternoon, your brain is like, yes. We're celebrating that victory.
That is so cool.
And it's wiring itself to want to crave those healthier choices. Isn't that neat?
That is so motivating.
Yeah.
Because it's not about being perfect. It's about those little wins adding up.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But let's be real. There are times where we just crave those comfort foods.
Of course. Yes.
Especially when we're stressed.
Yes.
That's when it's the hardest, right?
Yes.
So talk to me about that connection between junk food and stress.
Sure.
Because that's in the source material too. And I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah. Well, our brains, they crave that instant gratification and that dopamine hit. And especially when we're stressed. And so junk food, it really plays into that. It gives us that immediate, even though it's fleeting, that sense of reward and comfort.
Okay.
And our brains they were wired for survival. And so it hasn't quite caught up to the fact that a stressful day at work, does not require a mountain of cookies to get us through.
So our brain thinks we're facing a famine.
Right.
When really it's just like our inbox.
Exactly.
That is so funny.
Yeah, it's like those primal instincts coming out.
Yeah.
But here's the good news. We can actually retrain our brains to find those rewards in healthier ways. And our source suggests that we need to find new and sustainable methods to manage those emotions.
Which makes a lot of sense because it's like, okay, so if we're stressed, instead of reaching for that bag of chips, maybe it's go for a walk or put on some music or meditate or something.
Exactly.
Something that's actually going to nourish you instead of kind of just being a Band-Aid.
Exactly. And it made me think about this when the source was talking about setting ourselves up for success, and they were talking about choice architecture.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard of that?
I feel like we've talked about that before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where it's like, don't
tempt yourself.
Yeah, like put things out of sight, out of mind.
It is
like put them away.
Exactly. It's not about deprivation. It's about saying, okay, I know this is my weakness, so how can I set up my environment to support that?
Right.
And so if I don't have those tempting snacks readily available, then I'm less likely to just, give into that impulse.
Oh, I love that.
Out of sight, out of mind.
It's like you're tricking your brain.
A little bit.
It's so good. But another thing that I think a lot of us struggle with, because we've talked about food and we've talked about our phones. Mm-hmm. Another big one, I think, for people is procrastination.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Why is it that we do that?
Why do we do that?
We look at something and we're like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And then we just pick up our phone.
Right. Well, it turns out that our brains are incredibly good at perceiving large, complex tasks as threats. Mm. It's this old survival mechanism.
Wow.
That we've had since, caveman days.
So it's like our brain thinks that if we do that load of laundry, it's going to just drain us of every ounce of energy we have.
In a way, yes. Think about it. If you were back, thousands of years ago and your ancestors were, faced with a hungry lion.
Okay.
Their brain would go into survival mode. Right. Fight or flight.
Right.
And so now we don't have those same threats today. But when we're confronted with a massive project at work or, an overflowing inbox, that same mechanism in our brain is like, run.
Go eat something.
Yes.
Yes.
This is too much. Seek comfort in something easier.
That is hilarious and also so true.
Right.
So how do we combat that then? Because the source was talking about breaking it down into like bite-sized pieces, right?
Yeah. It's like we can trick our inner caveman by instead of seeing this massive project, it's like, no. We're just going to do these little things. So instead of, clean the whole house, it's like, just load the dishwasher. Right. Or instead of writing this 5,000-word report, it's like, I'm just going to write one paragraph.
Right. One step at a time. Break it down.
Exactly.
It just makes it seem so much less daunting. Yeah.
Right. Because you're not looking at this big, overwhelming thing.
Right.
You're looking at these like manageable steps.
Right. And each time you finish one, you get that little dopamine hit.
That little dopamine hit. Like, yes, we did it.
Okay, let's go.
Like, let's keep going.
I love that.
So you're really making it less intimidating, but you're also, again, reinforcing that positive behavior.
It's like rewiring your brain to like crave the accomplishment, not the avoidance of it. That's so cool.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah. Okay, but how do we make it stick long term?
Yeah.
Because I think we've all been there where, New Year's or whatever, you're like, I'm going to do this. And then a couple weeks later, you're like, back to your old ways.
Right.
So how do we actually get it to stick?
Well, our source talked about that routine is so important, consistency, because our brains, they love predictability.
Yeah, they do.
So when we start to add these new behaviors into our existing routines, then they become more automatic.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right.
So it's like instead of saying, I'm going to meditate, it's like every morning when I brush my teeth, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes.
Exactly.
Or something like that.
Exactly. You're anchoring it to something you already do.
That's so smart. I love that.
And it's like this, you're setting this little mental trigger.
Right.
To help you remember to do it.
Oh, and it's funny you say that because the other thing that the source mentioned was like tracking.
Oh, yeah.
Keep track of your progress.
Yeah, because it feels good to like check it off.
Exactly. I did it.
So whether you have one of those apps or, you want to just mark it on your calendar. Whatever works.
Yeah.
But just that visual reminder of, hey, I'm doing this.
I'm making progress.
I'm making progress. And it can be so motivating, just like, good for me.
Like a little pat on the back.
Yes, exactly.
That's so cool. So what's one little thing that people can start doing today if they're feeling overwhelmed?
I would say start small.
Okay.
Like pick one tiny little habit that you want to change.
Okay.
And just put all of your energy towards that one thing.
Okay. So not like your whole life.
Right. Don't try to overhaul everything at once. Maybe it's, 30 minutes before bed, I put my phone away. Or instead of having that soda, I'm going to drink a glass of water. Or I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk every day.
Something easy.
Something small. Something that you can sustain.
Something that you can stick to.
Yes.
Because it's not about being perfect.
Exactly.
It's just, it's about making that change, right?
It's about making that progress.
Progress over perfection.
Yes, exactly.
That's really cool. And each day is a new day.
It is.
To try again, which is nice. It's a nice way to think about it. Not too much pressure.
Exactly.
Because it can feel really overwhelming, like you were saying, if you're like trying to do all these things at once.
Right. You don't want to feel like you're back in caveman mode.
Exactly.
Ooh.
Oh, my goodness. Well, this has been so fascinating. I love talking about this kind of stuff.
Me too. It's so interesting.
It's just amazing how much we can really accomplish when we work with our brain.
Right.
And not against it.
Absolutely.
Because we've been trying to fight it this whole time. And it's like, no, if we just
need to understand it better.
Yeah, understand it.
Yeah.
And work with it.
Work with it. Yeah.
So what little change are you going to make today to break a habit? I want to know.
Yeah. It really is like we're kind of tricking our brains into making those changes.
Right. Which is pretty cool that we can do that.
It is neat.
Yeah. So it's like, instead of writing the 5,000-word report, I'm just going to write one sentence.
Yes. One sentence. There you go.
And then
one step at a time.
Yeah. And then you're like, okay, well, I'll just write one more sentence.
Exactly.
And then
Jay.
before you know it, you're like halfway there.
Right. And you're also, each time you do that, you're getting that little hit of dopamine.
Yes. I love it.
Which is saying, hey, this feels good. Let's keep going. This is good. This is good.
And you're less likely to like run away from it.
Exactly. You're not going into that fight or flight mode.
That's so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about like all these different ways to kind of like break these habits and look at these habits, but how do we make it stick long term? Because I think we've all been there where it's like New Year's or whatever, and you're like, this is it. I'm doing it. I'm changing. And then a couple weeks later, You're like, back to your old ways. So how do we actually get it to stick?
Well, our source talked about how routine is so important.
Okay.
And consistency.
Right.
Because our brains, they crave predictability.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. They do. So when we add those new behaviors into our already existing routine,
right.
It helps it become more automatic.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right.
So it's like, instead of I'm going to meditate, it's I'm going to meditate after I brush my teeth.
Exactly.
Or something.
Exactly. Anchor it to something you already do every day.
Because you already have that habit.
Exactly.
Okay, that's so smart.
You're just adding on to it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny you say that, because another thing that the source said was like, track it. Keep track of your progress, whether you have an app or you just want to mark it on your calendar or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah.
But just having that visual reminder of like, hey, I'm doing this.
Look at me go.
Right. Look at you go.
I'm amazing.
Exactly. And it can be so motivating.
Like a little pat on the back.
Yes, exactly. That's really cool. Yeah. So what's one little thing that people can start doing today, if they're listening, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, but I want to make a change. What's one little thing they can do?
Start small.
Okay.
Pick one tiny habit that you want to change.
Okay.
And just focus all your energy on that one thing.
Don't like overhaul your whole life.
Right. Don't go crazy. Maybe it's 30 minutes before bed, I'm putting my phone away. Or, instead of that afternoon soda, I'm going to drink a glass of water, or I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk every day.
Yeah, something like that.
Something small that you can sustain.
That you can stick to.
Yes.
Because it's not about being perfect.
It's not about being perfect. It's about
making a change.
Making the effort, right.
Exactly.
Making that progress.
Progress over perfection. That's what we say.
I love that. That is so good. And each day is a new day to try it again.
Exactly. You got this.
Which I love.
You do.
It takes the pressure off.
Exactly.
Exactly, because it can feel so overwhelming. Like we were saying, if you're like trying to do it all.
Right. You go right back to those old habits.
Right. Exactly. You don't want to be like in fight or flight mode all the time.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been so fascinating. I love talking about this stuff.
Me too.
It's so interesting.
It's so interesting how our brains work.
It is. And it's amazing how much we can accomplish when we just like work with our brain.
Right.
Instead of against it. Because
Exactly.
we spend so much time just like trying to fight it. And it's like, no, if we can work with it.
Understand it.
Yeah. Understand how it works. I love that.
Yes.
Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this deep dive with me.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was fun.
This was great. And for everyone listening, what small change are you going to make today? Let us know.